approve the minutes from the September 22nd meeting. So I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Great. Any objections? All right, the motion passes. We have two action items. The first one is resolution, first public comment period. Do we have any public comments?
No, there's no one signed up for public comment.
Okay. I forgot that last time, so I made sure to remember it this time. The first action item is resolution number 531, amend outside legal counsel contract. I'll turn it over to either Sam or Stacy to talk about that, or anybody else who on the call that needs to talk about it.
Since Franco's not here to go through it, what we're looking to do is the Fpdr board has an outside legal counselor, which is Lauren, and I don't know if he's on today's meeting or not. You use that, just an outside review to get outside expertise. Plus Lauren is also heavily into actuarial and pension stuff, so he can give us more detailed legal opinions involving those two items. This contract is done through the city attorney's office. However, and then they bill us back for that amount. So what we're looking to do is have this contract approved so we can release funds to the city attorney's office when they receive bills from Lauren. And it's actually Ogletree is the name of the firm that he represents or is working with.
Hey, Sam, is there any information on, is this an increase or are we staying the same, or what's the difference between last contract?
Kathy, can you give that background information?
Sure, it's going to be the contract is going to be for 4 years. Normally we extend for 3-year periods, but because there's only 4 years left in a total of 10-year period, the city attorney's office recommended going for a 4-year, and then just the not to exceed amount for the 4 years would be the $125,000, which is the same as what it was for the last 3.
So is that a total of 125 or 125 a year?
It's 125 for the 4 years.
And it was 125 for 3 years before?
Yeah, before, but we still had some money left that wasn't used up. So the city attorney's office recommended just going with the 125 and then
okay.
For the 4 years.
Sounds good.
And again, this is a fee for service arrangement, so it's not a flat 125. Lauren bills us for the time he uses, and so for the last time we didn't exceed the 125.
Good.
I'll make a motion. We accept resolution 531 as written.
And I will second that.
All right. Any objections? Great, passes. Let's move on to resolution 532, approve funding for Portland Police Bureau Wellness Initiative.
Yeah, we have with us today Leo Harris and Todd Tackett from the Portland Police Bureau Training Division. They want to ask for some funding of a wellness program from Fpdr. So I'm going to turn it over to Leo. I believe he's going to be driving of the presentation, and he'll explain to you what the program they want funded will do. You should have gotten in your packet, or it was a later email to you that included the actual funding request, as well as an earlier version of the PowerPoint. I don't think there's been a whole lot of changes, but some minor changes. So I'll turn it over to Leo and let you run with the show.
Thank you. And I'll actually defer to Todd initially, and then I'll be back in a minute.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you to Director Hutchinson and all the board for consideration on this. Both Leo and I work for the Police Bureau out at our training division. We are both dedicated to our new wellness program. It's been around for the last almost 2 years. And this project came with a large group of us working together, but from the wellness program, and it's directed at the officers we call the rapid response team, which have really been at the forefront during the last nearly 6 months of all the ongoing protests around here. So the impact and trauma is really probably the heaviest on this group that we're targeting. And so the proposal that Leo will cover, just to give you an overview of what that is, but he'll go into the details. And if you have any questions, please interrupt Leo and let us know. Happy to answer whatever we can. But Officer Leo Harris, it's all you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for allowing us to be here. I'm going to try to share my screen here. As Sergeant Tackett said, this proposal to you all is directly for the 60 or so officers that have been assigned full-time to the rapid response team. As you all probably very well know, we've had about 160 plus nights of protests and several riots. This has led to a lot of these officers ending up with physical and emotional injuries. And this all even started as soon as they were assigned full-time to the rapid response team. So a lot of these officers that were moved there, and some were detectives, they worked other places. They had day shift hours, they investigated crimes, and they responded to calls. And they already had established patterns for their families. And all of a sudden they got thrown into a whole new world where they're managing protests every night. And now they're working from 5 p.m. until the middle of the night. So this caused some pretty significant personal struggles for all of them, which we've heard greatly about. Obviously at work, lots of them were hit with things. So they had water bottles thrown at them, some of them frozen bricks and rocks and balloons, some filled with bodily fluids, which is pretty gross. And then paint, which I wanted to have a picture so that, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but I couldn't come up with one. The majority of these officers have their entire uniforms covered in red or blue or white paint. And in this profession, we definitely have a lot of pride in how we look in our uniforms every day. You're not even allowed in the door if it's not pressed and if you don't have your boots polished. And it's not fiscally responsible for us to replace these uniforms every day. So they are just going out in these uniforms that look terrible every day, which is obviously has an impact on them. And then some of the stuff they're having to deal with on a nightly basis, most of them have been spit on. There's people in their faces telling them to kill themselves, telling them to quit their jobs, and that everyone hates them. And we try to do some messaging, and a lot of them know that they shouldn't take it personally, that they should be able to just remain professional. But it's hard when somebody's in your face telling you that. It's hard to stay focused on the fact that the system might need to be reformed, and it's definitely okay to change and attack the system, but attacking our members, you know, on an individual basis, you know, is really challenging for them. And then you take that forward, sometimes they get off their shifts, and then we've actually had police officers followed all the way home in cars. So we try to tell our officers from the wellness perspective, you know, use that time on the way home to listen to music and unwind and get home and go to sleep, or prepare to go hang out with your families. And instead, a lot of them have been followed partway home, if not all the way home. Some have reported that their houses have been vandalized, and some of their family members have been harassed by folks who followed them home, which obviously that leads to them wanting to stay home and not come to work because they feel like they're leaving their family members exposed. Some of them have had their personal finances hacked, which anyone who's dealt with any identity theft stuff can understand and sympathize. It's very challenging to work on bills that you shouldn't have had to pay, or, you know, things that you didn't actually do, and worrying about your credit, etc. One of the outcomes that we haven't anticipated was being ostracized due to their profession. We've had lots of members tell us that close family members, extended family members, and friends have just ended their friendship. And some of them were even more sad, where they had friends, or they had their children come and tell them, hey, you know, this neighbor kid or this friend won't play with them anymore. And then they contact the other parents and they've said, sure enough, yeah, we don't want to be friends with you anymore because you're a police officer. So challenging for our members. We've definitely heard from them that a lot of them are feeling hopeless and traumatized. Some of their intimate relationships are at risk, and they might have been before, but this definitely put an added strain and an added burden on trying to resolve some of those things. And a huge number of them, it seems like, when we talk to them, are questioning if they can continue in law enforcement. And if they do continue in law enforcement, there are definitely quite a few of them that we're looking to switch to a different agency outside the Portland area. Trying to figure out the scope of the problem is challenging for us. We don't have lots and lots of statistics on it. I know that Kim and Sam might be able to weigh in on any additional injuries or PTSD or stress claims through FPDR. But the things that we looked at on our end, our employee assistance program used to last year and prior to that average about 1 call a week for assistance, for resources in dealing with work stress, home life stress, things like that. And now they're averaging about 1 call a day. And it's actually gotten to the point where our provider cascade has had to increase the number of providers they have available for us because they have enough members reaching out that they're all filling up and it's hard to make appointments. The other thing we looked at was injury log entries, and those are not FPDR claims. Those are things that we require our members to do for an injury they sustain at work in case it does end up becoming an FPDR claim. And as you can see, in 2019, there were less than 600 entries. And to date, this year, there have been almost 1,500, so a very significant increase. Our ask from you all is for help in transitioning these members back to their normal patrol duties. And we're asking them basically to move forward from this unique experience that a lot of members in the Bureau haven't had. Maybe a collective identity was formed, and now we're asking them to go back and join with other members who haven't had the same experience and go and serve the community in the ways that they used to. And I think a lot of them feel like, you know, the landscape of law enforcement and the landscape of Portland might have changed, at least for them. So our ask of you is a $20,000 investment for the PPB Wellness Restoration Project. It's a 2-week program, and then with an additional 8 follow-ups that are going to be much shorter, about 4 hours over the next 2 years. This program is going to include training and care for these officers' mental, emotional, and physical health. And these are the ways that we're looking at trying to do it. We're going to provide them individual opportunities for working with a mental health professional. And obviously, as a police officer, that's provided for them now by the Bureau. But there are obviously a lot of obstacles and barriers for officers seeking that out. And we're trying to remove some of those barriers, give them time at work and specific times where they're all doing it so that they can connect with a counselor. And we're making a push that even if it's not something they do in an ongoing fashion, if they need it later, they will already have a connection established. We're going to hold several group debriefings with a mental health professional. There's a bunch of different scenarios and incidents that have happened with them that have impacted them pretty greatly. One of which was having some of our members get hit with Molotov cocktails that were on fire. And that definitely impacted them. Moving on from that, they reported feeling, you know, much more afraid to come to work, afraid to police protests. You never knew which direction one of these things was going to come flying at them. And obviously our co-workers in the Fire Bureau became even more important that were embedded with these teams, you know, making sure that they were ready and able to put these things out. Moving on, we're going to give them stress and resilience classes, practice and training in how to do yoga and meditation, and then time to do it. We're going to allow them to consult with a physical therapist, work through any little nagging injuries they might have, and also set up fitness routines if they haven't done that, or if they want to strengthen the routines that they already have. We're going to provide them information on alcohol use. One of the things we definitely heard was alcohol use climbed a little bit, sometimes just as a way to deal with stress, or maybe even as a sleep aid, which is obviously not a healthy way to do it. Which leads us right into sleep. So we're going to give them information on sleep, how important it is, strategies for increasing their sleep and making the sleep that they do get better, because obviously that's critical to any kind of recovery. And last but not least, it's very important for the officers and their families to do some healing together, because obviously this has impacted any family members and the whole unit. So we have quite a bit of work going on for all of them. The anticipated results of this project are fewer and shorter PTSD and stress claims. Obviously, we anticipate there will probably be some claims, but we're hoping overall for a lower number of them. And the ones that we do get, we're hoping that they're shorter and people are back to work. Hopefully that will lead to healthier officers who are able to go out and serve their community much more effectively and even stick around for a full career as opposed to leaving. because of burnout or stress or PTSD. And obviously that will reduce the short or long-term disability costs for Fpdr, which is something you all obviously look into. As we all know, anytime someone's repeatedly exposed to emotional trauma, they might need help to recover and avoid causing long-term damage to themselves and their families and their communities. And we just want to say a big thank you for allowing us to come and make this proposal to you all as an investment in our officers going forward. Thank you very much. And we will obviously be here for questions.
Any discussion?
I would just like to say thanks for your presentation, Todd and Leo. That's great stuff. I work for the Fire Bureau. I'm a counterpart, and I represent the firefighters, but also represent all of the people, the police officers and the firefighters. And I think this is great. It's really proactive. It's kind of the direction we're trying to go to. Sometimes it's hard to get there, but that's just more good stuff. So great job on this. I absolutely support what you're doing here. And like you said, some of our fire members were involved in your RT team, obviously in a different capacity, but they might need something like this too. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that too. We do have some programs, but not specific for like what you're doing here. It's great to drill down on something rather than just a big broad category. You got a certain group of people that are experiencing something very unique, and to focus on that specifically is awesome. And that's how you get things done, rather than send everybody to a big class in general issues, and then you miss somebody. So this is great. I appreciate it. Good job.
Thank you. And one of the things we are absolutely trying to do is include the fire medics that were with RRT. Obviously, it's a bit of a challenge including them because this group of officers is in a group that works together every day. So we're able to steal them and do this 2 weeks. And then the follow-up, and obviously with the Fire Bureau, the medics that are assigned don't work with these guys full time. And so it'll be a more challenging, but we absolutely want to include the fire medics because they were definitely a part of that group.
It's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I for what it's worth, I think this makes a lot of sense, especially given our current situation. So I'm supportive of it as well. So if everybody's ready, we can move on, I think, unless there's more discussion or more questions that people have.
Just want to give you, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I too want to thank you for your presentation and for what appears to be a very thoughtful and hopefully helpful program to help transition people back. They've clearly had to deal with a lot. You know, as a member of the community, I'm disappointed that that anything erupted in violence towards those just trying to maintain the peace. So I'm disappointed, you know, to have witnessed so much of it. And I hope that this program is helpful. I'm curious about one thing, and that is, obviously with the negative interactions that have gone on, is there, whether separately or part of this program, any effort being made for those officers and others that were exposed to this to actually sit down and communicate directly with anybody else in the community that may have been out there in those protests? It seems to me difficult to clear the air and get rid of, you know, negative feelings and that kind of baggage unless you have an opportunity to communicate directly with the people that you feel have been, you know, launching those insults or attacks at you. So curious about that.
Funny you should ask about that. One of the days, actually several of the days, we are trying to bring in some external community members to talk with them. And there have been members of the community trying to show support, which is appreciative. But it's funny, it doesn't seem to have as much, it doesn't carry as much weight if it's members that we already expect to support us. So, I mean, if it's my mom or other people that do it, it is kind of, as you alluded to, it's much more helpful if it's people who are working towards police reform. Maybe they're not even historically pro-police, but what they are saying to our members is, we appreciate that you have a difficult job and we are trying to reform the system, and this is not personal. And that has seemed to be more helpful. We have had a couple other projects going where we tried to do some videos for our internal members from community members just like that. And we have not solidified who yet, but we are trying to bring in during that 2-week period on a couple of different occasions, community members to do exactly that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I left that off. I don't know why I left that off, but that is an important step.
Okay, thanks.
I would only add that when we presented this to the RT group, that one of their asks was to bring in community members because they've been dealing with all of this for so much. That's kind of been their world. And they wanted to know as they transition back, like, what does the community expect from us? Like, what is the new role of policing as we evolve and move forward? So as much as I think the community wants to know, I mean, we on the other side want to know too. So that's a great question. I'm glad you asked, and hopefully we can start to help with that conversation through this project.
Good. I again, from the outside, it would seem imperative. Otherwise, you can wall yourself off and heal yourself as best you can in isolation. But unless you can, communicate better with those that, have some sort of issues then with you and or methods, then there's not going to be any long-term understanding. So I'm encouraged to hear that. Thank you.
Well, I'm ready to make the motion. Sam, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you some of the finances on the side, just so you have how much this costs versus potential savings. In the PTSD presumption presentation last year, we presented you some cost on PTSD claims. And most of the PTSD claims were short duration. They cost $25,000 to $75,000 per claim. And long duration claims cost $750,000 to $1 million per claim. So they're only asking for $20,000. So if all they do could stop one small claim or get one person back to work versus staying on a long duration claim, this by far pays for itself. So I don't think there's any financial issues with this program.
Thank you.
I wanted to step in real quick. I apologize. I had a meeting run a little long, but it was something I needed to complete. I've talked at length with Todd and Leo, and I don't want to rehash it, but there's been nothing but greatness come out of this type of ideas and programs, and I truly believe this will help many of our members. So I think it's a great plan. So.
Well, I'm ready to make a motion. I make a motion that we approve resolution 532 as written.
Second.
Any objections?
No.
All right, motion passes. And we can move on to the information items now, I believe. I can turn it over, I think, to Jim is probably the person I'm turning it over to now, but I'm not positive.
Actually, here, Josh, let me just say a few words by way of introduction, and then
go ahead. Sorry, Stacey.
No, that's okay. And then I'll definitely pass it to Jim and Keith and Amanda. So in just a moment, some folks from Moss Adams, which is the firm that audits our financial statements, will tell you all about their audit investigations and findings this year. But from the staff side of the audit process, I just wanted to note that there were two things that were different this year. The first, obviously, is that everything was done remotely. Including field work, which is where the auditors are usually on site and literally digging through our files and our documents and interviewing staff and testing all of our controls and processes. So we had to do that entirely remotely this year. So that took a lot of planning and coordination and a lot of scanning. So I want to thank the Moss Adams folks and also the folks on my staff who made all of that happen. And the other thing that is different this year is the audit document itself, which the board should have in your packet. Believe it or not, we have actually been producing this enormous document in Microsoft Word since long before I came to Fpdr, which is really remarkable considering how long the document is and all the formatting challenges that exist with the tables and the sections and anyway. But throughout the last year, we've had a project with the accounting staff over at Office of Management and Finance to migrate our document into their professional publication software, the same software they use to produce the city CAFR, the city audit. So we got that completed this year. And so for the first time, I think the audit document, really does look like a truly professional report, which enhances our credibility with financial markets. We're kind of the primary audience for this document, including the folks who make bids on our tax anticipation notes every year. But equally importantly, it's just a much more efficient way to put the document together. It'll save time and it minimizes errors in the document itself. So I also wanted to thank the folks over in Central Accounting for helping us pull that off in the last year. And if you have any feedback on the document, I know you all read it cover to cover. Let me know if there's anything you can see to improve it. But with that, I will introduce three folks who are here with us from Moss Adams. Keith Simovic, who is the senior manager, kind of in charge of the ground troops that do the Fpdr audit. Jim Lanzarata, who is the Moss Adams partner in charge of the overall City of Portland engagement. And I am so sad to say that he is with us for the very last time because he is retiring this year. And but we're happy to welcome Amanda McCleary Moore, who is the partner at Moss Adams, who will be taking over for Jim, who is also with us today. So I'll let Moss Adams folks take it from here.
Very good. And hopefully we have arranged with you, we do have a PowerPoint that might help us power through this. So does someone have that ready to?
Yeah, I'll pull that up, Jim, 1 second.
Okay. Well, while that's happening, yeah, so the team has allowed me to start off, I guess, my swan song. And so what we want to do, of course, is just tell a bit about what you engaged us to do. And obviously you want to know the results. And anytime we do an audit, our professional standards tell us that there are certain required communications of those charged with governance. And so we want to do that. And there's a few changes in accounting standards down the road. We might just mention a couple things. So if you could advance the slide for me. You know, public pension plans are absolutely, I don't know, I'm spellbound by them. And as a board, I think you've got some additional challenges because you've got a lot of stakeholders that have varied interests. And sometimes those interests even are competing. But even within the financial statements that you've asked us to audit, there are different reporting elements that are very important to different stakeholders. I just thought I'd mention a couple things and then maybe you can tell us how our report does in communicating the results of how the audit intertwines with these things. You know, first of all, as a board, you're primarily interested, I would think, in the money in and the money out. What are the resources that you have to work with to make the benefit payments to your covered members? That's a very short-term focus. Obviously, you're very interested in the property taxes that fund the benefit payments. And you know, the city of Portland's involved in that, and so are all the counties that the city operates in. So I would guess you're very interested in the accuracy of those county assessors to do the right assessments with property tax bills. You're relying on the city to actually deposit those dedicated taxes into the trust fund for payment of benefits. And you're interested in us in kind of auditing the accuracy of all of that. But also the benefit payments, you know, I would guess that you're very interested in what is the accuracy of determining who's eligible for a benefit? Is the calculation of the dollar amount correct and in compliance with the agreement you have with your covered members? And so a big part of our audit is focused on that. But your financials also have a long-term element to them. And that, the stakeholder in that is the city of Portland. And what I'm talking about is that the total liability, the actuarially determined total liability at a point in time, which tries to measure the benefits that your members have earned. The city actually has to book that liability in its financial statements. And that work is all dependent on the actuarial science. And so where our audit intertwines with that is all of that information goes in your footnotes and it's based on the actuarial work. So are the assumptions the actuary is using, are they in agreement with the applicable accounting standards that the Governmental Accounting Standards Board puts out there? And also, are they getting accurate census information from city, fire, and police that kind of drive all that actuarial science? So you've got two different stakeholders kind of interested in your financials have to address those interests. And then finally, an area that you're very interested in, but isn't as much of a focus of our audit, is kind of the financial sustainability of the plan. So as you know, you've got this really interesting way of financing member benefits, and that's through that property tax. And fortunately, unfortunately, it's a fascinating way and a stable way of financing benefits, but the way it was done was based on a pay-as-you-go and a cap on the amount that you can assess property taxpayers. So you have this challenge for a period of time where, is that property tax going to be sufficient? Because there is a cap. And you manage that risk by getting economic analysis that you update. I think it's on a 5-year rotation where you look at all the scenarios of what could happen with property values and benefit payments, and will they be sufficient? So the sustainability is important to you. It's not a focus of the audit, although we're also interested in making sure the disclosures in the financial statements are adequate if you ever got to a point where there would be substantial risks about the sufficiency of those payments. So anyway, with that, if you advance the slide, my team's allowed me to give you the good news before I turn it over, and they'll get into a few more details. But as it relates to those financial statements, which Stacy talked to you about, a very nice looking document. Good job, Stacy and team. We did our work and we're able to issue what we call an unmodified opinion. So basically our work supported that your financial statements are accurate and they have the required disclosures for a pension plan as issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So great job in your ability to put together an accurate document. We're also required by our contract to follow an additional level of auditing standards. We call them government auditing standards. And that requires that we really look at the internal controls and report to you if there are any significant holes in those. So what are those checks and balances that management uses to put together an accurate financial statement? So we're looking at cash controls, the benefit payment controls, the controls you have over the review of the work of the actuary, and how all of that gets recorded in the financials. And we're happy to report to you that we did not see any big deficiencies that are reportable to you in those checks and balances that management uses. So in just a minute or two, I'm here to tell you good news, something that takes your staff all year to get right, and a crew of staff to do, and leadership on your part that enables them the tools and the support to get to this point. So excellent job, good, clean report, the best you can get. And with that, I'd like to turn it over. We'll provide a few more details of how we got there.
Perfect. Yep. And I'll jump in next. Thanks, Jim. To give you guys a little more insight into, how do we get to this point where we can deliver those final results? That if you look at the actual financial statement document, the part that we're responsible for, are just a few pages out of that document. But to get to that point, we kind of want to walk you through that process. What are the areas that we looked at? What did we identify as kind of those significant audit risk areas? And what are some of the more significant procedures that we perform to get comfort over the accuracy, completeness of those balances and activities and disclosures reported in that financial statement document? So this is something too, when we think about significant audit areas, that we talk about as a team internally every single year to come up with our audit plan based on what is, either the areas that have inherent, more higher risk areas, or if it's something where it's a new accounting standard that's going to need to be implemented that can have a significant impact on the document itself. Is it something where we're seeing significant changes in the personnel? Of course, we haven't had that in the current year. Or the last several years that I've been involved, at least. Those are the types of things, though, that we're taking into consideration just to say, you know, where do we want to spend the bulk of our time? And this year, of course, COVID was a big topic of discussion on pretty much on every one of our audits, because we're doing these all remotely now. We know many of our clients are working in a remote environment, and we want to understand what impact has that had on the organization financially, operationally, and when we think about internal controls, because we're spending a lot of time getting an understanding of that system of checks and balances. And we want to know, you know, both before and after the onset of the pandemic and this remote work environment, are we seeing any impact on the consistency of the application of those checks and balances? Are we seeing things that aren't maybe happening that did before in terms of reviews and approvals and reconciliations and good controls from that regard? So that was kind of a new risk area that we were looking at definitely this year. But to give you a little more insight into some of these, and I'd say one thing that's a benefit to Fpdr is the fact that we do audit the city of Portland's CAFR report as well. And so with some of these, we're getting a lot of insights and ability into auditing, you know, for something like cash and investments, where Fpdr, of course, has a piece of that overall pool of cash and investments for the city. Well, since we're doing the city's audit, we're able to confirm all those cash and investments and see how it's allocated between the various funds and what was allocated to Fpdr, and is that collected by staff and reported in your financial statement document appropriately as well. And results there that, you know, the balances were supported, that they are supported by those third-party confirmations as we're reaching out to your financial institutions or the city's financial institutions for its pooled cash and investments, and everything is reconciled and reported appropriately. Property tax revenues and receivables, that's another area where we're getting a lot of leverage from the audit work we do for the city of Portland. And so for the confirmations, when we're reaching out to the various counties and getting an idea of what should be recorded as property tax revenues and outstanding receivables as of June 30th, and what is Fpdr's portion of that, is that collected, allocated, and reported appropriately within Fpdr's financial statements. And again, we didn't have any material issues from that regard as well. Pension liabilities, this is one that, you know, Jim kind of mentioned a little bit about kind of the short-term, long-term look, the fact that some of this is also reported within the city's financial statements, their CAFR report, and really kind of get an idea of what are those actuarial assumptions that are used in their calculations. Is that one in compliance with kind of the methodologies and ways that you should go about with performing this actuarial calculation? And is it based on inputs that are accurate and complete as well when we think about the census data that is sent along to the actuary so that they can do their calculations? Does that represent a complete population of the covered members within there? And is the data, when we think about hire dates and other demographic information that's within that census data document, is that accurate as well? So we're doing some sampling and some testing of that. And again, we didn't have any significant errors that were noted in that process. Benefit payments, I think this is another one that Jim touched on a little bit, and just the fact that, you know, one thing that you really want to have a good handle on is the accuracy of those benefit payments. Are you paying folks that are eligible, that are covered members, and are you paying them based on calculations that are consistent with those planned documents? So that's something where we're pulling a sample of those, and we're doing that's probably where we're spending the bulk of our time, I would say, in terms of our testing, is pulling detailed samples of those and testing those payments, making sure that they went to the right people, that they were calculated at the right amounts, and they started and stopped at the right time as well. Financial close and reporting, this is a key internal control process, but this kind of goes back to kind of that overall financial statement document and our review of that to make sure that, does that include all of the bells and whistles required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board? Is it complete and accurate and ties back to the information that we audited when we did our field work, or at least this year, remote audit field work? And are we seeing any inconsistencies in that process? So that is a key part of what we're doing, where we spend a lot of time to make sure that that document is complete and accurate. And then finally, you've got a little bit of a challenge there with making sure that your disclosures are complete and transparent. And Jim talked a little bit about you know, the risks and uncertainties out there with the cap on property taxes, and the fact that there is some level of risk, or at least you want to be transparent to the fact that there is some level of risk that there could be a year in which benefit payments could exceed those property tax revenues that are coming in. So, to the extent that Fpdr is doing that projection every few years to get an idea of what is that risk, what is the likelihood that that's going to happen, and then disclosing that within your financial statements to alert the reader of, hey, there is this uncertainty out there. And what is the likelihood, at least based on those projections that have been performed by a third party, what is the likelihood that that's going to happen? So just being very transparent in that process, that's something that we want to spend a lot of time on and make sure that the Fpdr financial statements are very open and transparent with regards to that. Okay, and then with that, I want to turn it over. Stacy mentioned that Amanda McCleary-Moore is a new member of our team this year and a partner that's transitioning in for Jim. So I want to give her an opportunity to go through the next few slides.
Thanks, Keith. I'm excited to be working with everyone. I just wanted to make a quick comment that Stacy mentioned that this was the first year that they had put the financial statements together in this way using another program, and they look really good. And this was my first year getting to work with you guys, and I did not know that. And so when I reviewed them as part of the audit process, that was one of my comments back to the team, is that these look really good. So I kind of wanted to reiterate that point. I had very few comments as my part is reviewing the financial statements. So really good job in putting those together. I thought that they looked really good and very professional. So I have some additional communications to report as part of our audit. In addition to the reports that Jim mentioned that we issue and get bound with your financial statements, we're also responsible for providing some additional communications as part of our audit. We can do that in writing or in a presentation. So we're here to do that today. The first one is just a kind of a reminder. Jim touched on it, so I won't hit it too hard, but we were engaged to express an opinion over your financial statements based on our audit. So as part of that audit, we do consider your internal controls, but we don't issue an opinion over those internal controls. So we do have that second report that we issue under the governmental auditing standards. And as part of that, if we did identify some sort of gap in internal controls, essentially, which means that an error could slip through the cracks, we have to evaluate that and determine if it needs to be communicated in writing in one of your reports. And as Jim already mentioned, we had no items to report in that report. We may identify some best practices, and we typically would communicate those with management verbally if we had anything, but we did not identify anything that rose to the level of significant deficiency, which essentially just means that we think that it's important enough for you as trustees to know, or material weakness where we think that there's potentially a material error that could slip through the cracks. So we don't have anything to report in that area. A few other items. As part of putting the financial statements together, management is responsible for selecting significant accounting policies that you follow in order to put your financial statements together and record your transactions. Those are disclosed in Note 1 to your financial statements. And there was nothing in there that significantly changed or that there was uncertain guidance about that we would communicate with you if that occurred. So as part of putting the financial statements together, management is also responsible for judgments and accounting estimates that get reported in the financial statements. Clearly, your most significant estimates are around your pension liabilities, not only the ones that get recorded in your financial statements and are on the face of your financial statements, but you also have a very significant disclosure. I think it's around $4 billion liability that's disclosed in the notes. Of course, you do hire actuaries to assist with those estimates, but as Jim and Keith have already touched on, it's very important that management is providing those actuaries with accurate and timely information so that they can put together good estimates. As part of our audit and part of our testing, and as we do all the work that Keith mentioned that we're doing, if we identify an error, we have to evaluate that error and how material it is. And if we identify a material error in the financial statements, management needs to make that adjustment in order for us to issue our clean opinion. If it's below a material amount, management does have the opportunity to pass on that adjustment and not affect the opinion on the financial statements. As you can see on the slide here, we did not have any audit adjustments that were considered material or items that management passed on. So nothing to report there. So we like to report even when we don't have those items so that you are aware of items we would report about if they occurred. These next three are kind of in that same boat. So if management consulted with other accountants about either the applicability of an accounting standard or even questioning an audit practice, they would be required to communicate that with us, and we're not aware of any such consultations. If we had any disagreements with management over the audit or accounting principles, we would report that to you. We're pleased to report that we have no disagreements with management. And then the last one is the same thing. If we had any sort of difficulties in performing the audit, even in this environment with COVID-19 and doing the audit remotely, we did not run into any difficulties in performing the audit and were able to issue the audit on time. Management was able to provide a draft of the financial statements in the time frame that was agreed upon. So it all just went very well. And then that last one we've already touched on. We don't have any internal control deficiencies that were identified that either rose to the level of communication. So is essentially what that is saying there. And so those are kind of the conclusions on our audit. We want to look at the future just a little bit. Of course, the GASB has a lot of projects that are ongoing, quite a few accounting standards that will be applicable in the future. And we just wanted to kind of touch on three that would be applicable to you specifically in the future. Luckily, all these three projects are not in the stage where they have issued accounting standards that need to be implemented, but we think that they're important enough to communicate to you so that you're aware of kind of what's on the horizon and what the GASB is looking at. As I go through these three, they're all sort of related. I wouldn't be surprised if these get issued into accounting guidance, that they come out at the same time, just because they are kind of all related. That first one is on the financial reporting model. And really, it's just to make improvements in financial reporting. So it'll take a look at the standard that you follow right now, which is GASB 34, and how the financial statements get put together. And the overall goal of that new standard would, if it comes out, would be to present information that isn't necessarily essential to decision making. So really looking at the financial statements and are they providing that information that's essential for decision makers to make decisions on the financial statements. Kind of related to that, they're going to take a look at revenue and expense recognition. So the timing of when you record revenue or when you incur expense and how that gets reported in your financial statements is being looked at. They're working on putting together guidance that it would be principles based on recording those transactions. So that could affect budgeting and information that you use your financial statements. The overall goal of that, again, is to really make sure that the timing of recording those makes sense and helps with being able to make decisions based on that financial data. And the last one is the disclosure. So when you're reading through your financial statements, you'll notice that there are quite a few note disclosures. So that part of the financial statements where there's the accounting principles and it talks about the plan and all of the estimates. Over the past probably 5 to 6 years, those note disclosures have really expanded. And so the GASB is going to take a good look at what is actually essential to the disclosures. While I have yet to see many accounting standards come out that have reduced note disclosures, maybe this is an opportunity to look at what's in there and become a little more efficient and effective disclosures. So we'll see what comes of that, but this could definitely change the look and feel of your financial statements in the future. And with that, we just want to say thank you to Sam and Stacy and Micah and their team. The audit went really well. As I mentioned, it went on time. We got everything we needed. Working in this remote environment, it was very effective to use the portal, and in meetings like this where we're using a WebEx or Zoom calls, and everybody was very respectful of our time and getting us the information in order to be able to meet our deadlines for you. Additionally, we want to make sure that we mention thank you to Carrie for her administration of our audit contract. We very much appreciate getting to work with the city, including you guys and all the other component units, and just thankful that we get to do that. And I am excited about working with you again next year. And with that, we'll open it up if you guys have any questions.
Yeah, just send it back. I don't know if you have any additional comments, and clearly any questions. I know we kind of went kind of fast. It was pretty but kind of fast. So please, I would like to entertain any questions anyone would have.
Any
Okay,
questions
I have a couple of simple ones. Hopefully, my first one is: are these financial statements for the plan incorporated as part of the city's financial statements?
Yes, they are. In fact, the city, yeah, it's kind of interesting. The city and governmental accounting standards require that it's kind of a buildup process. If there is depending on relationships with trust funds like Fpdr and like Prosper Portland is another example, there's a relationship there with the city. And if you meet certain criteria, then you roll financial statements into the cities. So you'll be able to see Fpdr kind of in its own section of the city's comprehensive annual financial report, just like you'll be able to see Prosper Portland's information within the bound cover of the city's report. So yes, so you got to get yours done first, so then the city can get theirs done timely as well.
Okay. And then my second question was just, you alluded to the fact that it was helpful to the plan, the fact that you work with the city, and I hadn't really considered before just the revenue verification process, that whole tax revenue. Are they doing it correctly? Are they getting the receivables over the plan? I've always focused on the liability side and benefit calculation accuracy side, but I hadn't really thought about where the money comes from in this very unique plan to pay the benefits. If that money doesn't come correctly, then the plan could be in a world of hurt. So how much efficiency really is created if you were not auditing the city's plan? How much more work would that be for you on that part?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. If you think about this plan, it's really a $3.5 billion plan, or a $4 billion plan. Most of our governmental pension plan clients are able to collect resources in advance. So they have the investment side of things. So there's auditing of investments. In your case, it's limited. You have maybe 20 million in the bank at year end anyway, fluctuates during the year, but there's still effort involved there. I would say for a pension plan your size, our normal fees are probably somewhere in the $40,000 to $70,000 range. So it gives you some idea. I think our fees for your plan are in the $25,000 to $30,000 range, somewhere in there. So maybe half. And a lot of that is because we're able to leverage off of work that's already performed over at the city. So all the auditing over cash that Keith mentioned, your share of the city's pool, so that's already done. We get to leverage off that work. There's a little bit of additional effort to make sure what's entitled to you is really represented in your accounting and in your financials. The property taxes, all the information that goes to county assessors, that gets included in tax bills, the auditing of all of that, and the collection, and then the recording of your piece in your trust fund financials, that's already done by virtue of the work that we're doing over on the city side. So really, Keith hit it, we're able to focus on the distribution side. Are you really paying people correctly? And on the actuarial side, is the actuary really doing the work they need to and following the applicable standards? Do they have accurate census data and the testing of the underlying data from fire and police employees? So
thanks for explaining that. That's a nice feature for this plan.
yeah, absolutely.
Are there any other questions for the folks from Moss Adams? If not, I'll just add that in addition to the savings that Jim was talking about, there's also staff time savings. We would have to go through this with 2 audit firms on the city treasury pool and the property tax receivable side, which would be a lot of additional work. So we do enjoy having on the same firm do the city audit and the FPDR audit.
You know, one thing.
And also just to, mention when, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I'm sorry, Catherine, one of the things just to keep in mind is that, okay, there are economies of scale, but recognize that a pension plan is really different and unique. And so just because an audit firm can audit a city, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the expertise to do the work on a pension plan. There's unique accounting standards that apply to a pension system. So yes, there's economies of scale, but you want to make sure whatever firm that is engaged has that additional expertise and experience with a governmental pension system. So anyway, and I'm sure and hopefully Sam and Stacy are involved in the city's selection of the external audit firm. And if not, you might want to press that issue with the city and Kari Guy over in the auditor's office to make sure your interests are represented in a proposal process for external audit services. Go ahead, Stacy.
I would agree with that from my own experience outside of this plan, and given the magnitude of OPEB and pension liabilities overall to an agency's financial statements, it's a pretty significant part. So having that expertise is really meaningful.
Yes, and we do have a seat on the city's contract selection committee and have for the last 2 cycles that we've gone out for the financial audit RFP. So I filled that seat one time and Mika Obara on my staff filled that seat another time, but so we are represented in that process. And then adding to, just what Trustee McLeod said about the importance of pension liabilities for the government, for in this case, we're a single employer plan sponsored by the city. And I am confident that we're the largest, Jim will correct me if I'm wrong, but we're the city's largest liability by a long shot. So dropping that big $4 billion number into the city's financial statements, it's a big deal, and it has to be right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, well, if there aren't any, I really do want to welcome Amanda and say how excited we are to work with her. But I also want to close out with a special thanks to Jim, who some of you know, but most of you don't. So let me tell you, as someone who does know him, that his professionalism and his wit and his insights and his really shockingly detailed knowledge of everything related to GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. I mean, really shockingly detailed knowledge, even for an auditor, will be deeply missed. We just wish him a really happy retirement. I hope he has hobbies that he's half as passionate about as he is about accounting and financial reporting. I'm sure he does, but good luck, Jim. It's really been a pleasure to work with you.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like I'm leaving you in good hands. Keith and Amanda are obviously very well versed in GASB as well, but thank you. I appreciate those comments. It's been a pleasure working with the city. I tell people in my career, I kind of feel like I can place clients that I've worked with my professional progression. There's a handful, and the city's clearly been one of those. It just feels like, those that help you propel you in your career, and the city's afforded that to me, among others. And so I've been very appreciative as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo Stacy's comments. I think, Jim, you'll be missed. We haven't worked very closely together, but I'm familiar with your work, and Amanda, welcome. And Keith, you and I have connected over the last 6 months. So I think I'm optimistic about the future still. And so I think yeah, we can probably move on if everybody's ready to kind of head to I assume I'm kicking it back to you, Stacy, for the expenditure stuff.
Yep, but you'll be happy to hear that I have very little to say about financial
I am happy to
expenditure.
hear that.
I knew that would make you happy. There really isn't anything too interesting to report. If you have the financial expenditure report in front of you, you'll see that our tax anticipation note proceeds came in August. That's about 31.7 million coming in August. It's on like the third line down in the revenue table. So, that's always good. But other than that, things really look pretty normal for this time of year. We do not have first quarter billings showing up in here for police and fire PERS contributions, which are of interest to lots of folks because of the really high overtime we've seen at police and fire in the first quarter because of wildfires and also because of protests. We did actually get the billings from fire just, I think, last week, but they haven't made it into the financial system yet. And indeed, fire had very high overtime in the first quarter. I'm sure that that's almost entirely wildfire related, but we have not seen the police billings yet. So, we're anxious to take a look at those, but they will be what they will be, and we shall pay them because that's what we're here to do. But that's really all I have to say about the expendievy report.
Stacey, can I ask a very dumb question that I should know the answer to? But in January, are we going to get a levy adequacy report?
Yes, in January. So Milliman, our actuaries, are busy working on the full valuation, which will be based on data as of June 30, 2020, and then the accompanying tax levy adequacy analysis. So they plan to present that to the board at your January meeting. Yes.
Okay, that's going to be a bit of a challenge this year, given the COVID and what's happened with real estate, especially commercial real estate downtown. So maybe we can have an offline conversation about this, just because.
Yes, Matt and Scott will certainly want to talk to you specifically, Chair Harwood, about property taxes and what we think about that to the degree we can think anything.
I'm not sure we have answers. I just think it's going to be a little more uncertain than it's been in the past. That's all.
And I'm sure they'll want to be conservative in how they reflect that, in the levy adequacy analysis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Any other Fpdr updates? Sam?
Yeah, I've got a couple, one update, and then we'll talk over the future agenda and the meeting schedule for next year. So the only update I have is that there will be an amendment going through a charter amendment going through City Council tomorrow. The city auditor's office by charter is allowed to go through and make corrections to the charter. Any part of the charter they see corrections need to be made, and they're minor corrections. They aren't substantial to any changes. And they've been working on a project for a while for gender neutral language. And so they've identified several places in the Fpdr in chapter 5 of the charter, so the Fpdr plan, to where they need to change the he's and she's to they's or some other type of wording. I've looked through it all. A couple of my staff have too. None of the changes are significant or they're totally insignificant as to what's happening. Most of the changes are in the Fpdr 1 plan because they used he, she an awful lot. So they're getting rid of that. If this is approved, I will send you a copy of the document that shows all the changes in the charter. Again, it's just a few places in our charter, no impact to what we do. So I'll let you, again, I'll send out that version, assuming it's approved tomorrow. See if I can quickly share my screen on one topic here. Okay, I can't find it, just a minute. Let's try this again. Okay, so did something come up on there? Have you seen what I'm sharing? Okay, so this is the proposed meeting schedule for next year. You can see here in January, as we said, the levy analysis and actuarial evaluation, also the budget approval. So this is our heavy financial meeting. Probably take some time. Again, what you heard Josh and Stacy talk about, the actuarial and levy analysis may take some time to go through that. as every meeting as you go through here, they're on the fourth Tuesday of the month with the exception of March. Historically, we don't hold one during spring break for Portland Public Schools, so we moved that up a week. And then if I can go down here, November, we move it up a week so we don't do it the week of Thanksgiving. So if anybody has any concerns with the dates here, let me know now, or go ahead and let Kathy know. And assuming we don't, we'll go ahead and make this the, instead of proposed, we'll make it the approved one and post it for people. So,
Is that in our board documents?
excuse me?
Is that in our, I don't see that in my,
That should have been in the email because we sent you the email that included the Portland Police Bureau's wellness program information and this. So if not, Kathy can resend out those documents to you.
Yeah, Jason, it's one of 3 documents in that email.
that if you want to approve this now, if you could just expand that so I can see it. I don't think I see any problems, but I can't see the whole thing.
Okay, let's see here. Well, it's not cooperating here on me right now. That should be the whole document right there. Can you see it all?
Yeah, with my young eyes. Okay, yeah, that all looks good to me.
Okay, and we can adjust these dates anytime. We're not making this a firm document. It's just we're publishing it, and then as things happen during the year, we can slide the date back and forth for a particular meeting on that. And then let's see if I can. Okay, go back there. So then that was the last I had on my thing, Josh.
All right, anything else from anybody? Brian, congratulations on your position. So we'll welcome you on the board through at least the end of next year, it sounds like. So
Yes.
That's great. And thank you everybody for your time. And I think we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thanks, gang.
Bye.
All right, take care.